Bore da pawb a chroeso. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this meeting. You will see that the first item of business is for the committee to elect a chairperson. Governance and audit committees as statutory committees have some limitations and some restrictions on who can be chairperson. The requirement is that the chairperson is one of the three lay people, as they are called within the legislation, co-opted onto the committee. Bearing that in mind, are there any nominations for the position of chair? Councillor Parkhurst.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to nominate Alan Rainsford. In making that nomination, I'd like to place on record that Alan's been an excellent previous chair of this committee. He's also adds an awful lot of value to the process. He's got an independent, scrutinising mind, challenges where things need to be challenged, and I'm sure will make an excellent chair for the forthcoming period.
Thank you, Councillor Parkhurst. Is there a seconder for that nomination? Councillor Healy online, and I see a couple of other people.
Yes, sir. I'd like to second that nomination.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other nominations? No. So in that case, then we will go straight to the vote. All those in favour, please. 2, 3, 4. Any against? No. Any abstentions? No. So congratulations, Mr. Rainsford. You are elected chairperson. And I will hand over the reins to you.
Thank you.
Thank you for electing me as chair of the committee, and thank you for those kind words, Councillor Parkhurst. Item 2 is on the agenda today is the appointment of a vice chair. Do we have any nominations for the position of vice chair? Councillor Healy, your hand's raised.
I wish to nominate Councillor Andrew Parkhurst if he's willing to do it.
Thank you. Is that seconded? Councillor Carberry?
I'd like to formally second that proposal, please.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations? Can I ask Councillor Parkhurst, are you willing to stand as vice chair? I know you did an excellent job as chair of the last committee.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I am willing to be nominated. Thank
you. In that case, can all those wanting to support the proposal, can you please show? Thank you. Any against? No. Any abstentions? No. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Parkhurst, you've been voted as vice chair of the committee. Thank you. Moving on to item 3, apologies. I think we have apologies from Councillor Coppell. Is that the only apology we have? I think this would be an opportune time to welcome some new faces in the room. Councillor Priest is now a serving member of this committee. We also have 2 new lay members, Martin Lewis and John Davis, who were their positions on the committee were approved at the last council meeting, I understand. Councillor Priest and the 2 lay members haven't been formally trained as such, so they're not able to vote at this meeting, but they can, with my approval, ask any questions should the burning need arise to ask questions. So if you could indicate at the time if you do wish to ask. Okay, thank you. So that's apologies. Item 4, declarations of interest. Do any members of the committee have any interest to declare? No. Okay, thank you. Item 5 are the minutes of the last meeting. The meeting was held on 25th of March 2026. So these minutes start on page 5 of our agenda pack. I'll go through each page, just for matters of accuracy. So page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10. So we would appear to be happy with matters of accuracy of the minutes. So we need now to confirm them as a correct record. Can I have a proposer for the recommendation, please? Councillor Healy, and a second to Councillor Carberry. Thank you. So all those in favour of the recommendation, please show. Thank you. Any against? Any abstentions? No. Okay, so those minutes are approved as a correct record. Thank you. Item 6, urgent matters as agreed by the chair. I don't believe there are any urgent matters. Be corrected if anybody put those out to me. No. Okay, thank you. Item 7 is the first substantive item on the agenda, and it's the annual governance statement for 25-26. This item starts on page 11 of the pack, and the purpose of this is to endorse the annual governance statement for 25-26. I think it's going to be, is it Neil is going to open the batting on this item? Thank you.
Yeah, Prydab Pawb, morning Chair. Members who will be well familiar with this report, it gets presented every year. It's quite an extensive report. There's a little bit more detail in it this time in terms of some of the appendices that's at the back. But fundamentally, and I'll go through some of the items within the document, the basis for the report in relation to the annual governance statement to set out in accounts and Audit Wales Regulations 2018 and seeks to evidence a sound system of internal control. As I said, the document in the appendices sets out some very detailed pieces of work and consultation that's been undertaken. The basis of the activities is and revolves around the 7 core principles, principles A to G set out in 104E report. The themes for improvement in relation to last year will indicate within the report that there are some additional areas. Those are set out in Appendix B, and progress against risk and mitigating actions to address the governance issues identified in the AGS last year have also been included. That indicates progress on those as well, and there are a number of appendices in your reports. The proposal is to present a mid-year report in relation to this document. I think that's a really reasonably sound and sensible process and procedure. Quite happy to take any questions, Chair. As I said, it is a report you will be familiar with, and it builds upon every year and built upon every year. And the committee is well versed in the content of it.
Thank you. Thank you, Neil. Are there any questions from members of the committee? Councillor Parkhurst.
Yeah, Diolch, Chair, and thank you, Chief Executive, for the report. I'm a little confused by pages 19 and 29, which seem to be a repetition. Perhaps it's a difficulty of seeing things on screen rather than having paper where you can put it side by side. So I'd just like to know why things are repeated. But on more sort of substantial matters, on page 31, there's a need, it says, to start considerations earlier for ensuring a sustainable budget, including identifying opportunities within the strategic transformation programme. Now, this year's budget was approved on the basis that there was, I think, £2 million saving from the strategic transformation programme. I think we need to be satisfied as a committee that there is sufficient impetus with developing and implementing that, and that the budget for next financial year is well underway, because I'm not aware of the current progress, and I am getting concerned that that needs to be done as soon as possible. On page 32, which is the effectiveness of the council's governance arrangements, there does seem to be a deterioration recorded in the effectiveness for the latest year. And I'm wondering whether that's an actual deterioration or whether the recording of this is now becoming more accurate, in that we're more aware of any shortcomings which there might be. And then lastly, on pages 51 to 52, where it refers to the officer-member relationships, there have been workshops carried out to address this, but are we confident that progress is being made, or is this a tick box exercise? Diolch yn fawr, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Parkhurst is correct. Transformation is a key component of this. You'll notice in the further reports in this, it triangulates this document with the PPA, which also has a lot to say about transformation. There will be an update report coming into Cabinet that provides clarity and should provide a degree of confidence to members around where the transformation programme is, the resources deployed to that transformation programme, and where we are in relation to actions. And it should leave members with a degree of confidence around progress being made in relation to transformation. In terms of governance, I guess in terms of that particular table, there's a maturity in the organisation, isn't there? You know, we've been doing this for a number of years. Members that have been with us for a number of years have engaged more fully, been more challenging, and commented more freely in relation to what their perception of is in relation to the organisation. And that flows through in terms of that table. That's not to say there's a deterioration to the extent that you may have alluded to, but it's about maturity. It's also reflective of the overall position in relation to the council, its financial position, and where it sits within the whole framework of the 22 local authorities. So maturity is the first point I'd raise, and an increased maturity and understanding of how the council operates and how it adds value in terms of its member feedback, in terms of this committee in particular, in relation to where we've ended up in terms of the AGS. The member aspect, I don't know whether you wanted to rate, whether you wanted to add. Yeah, okay, so I'll leave Gareth to respond to that particular point. Thank you.
Over to you, Gareth.
Thank you. Two things that I'd like to pick up, if I might. Just in relation to governance, Chair, the internal audit team has lost a few members of staff over the last 12 months. What that has meant is that they have had to focus their work into higher risk areas. So they've been looking out all the bad bits, or the possibly bad bits, and not necessarily looking at the good bits, because they haven't had the capacity to do so. So there's possibly a slight skew within the reports as a consequence of reacting to circumstances. Mrs. Brownbill will be able to give you more detail in relation to that if desired. On member officer relations, we did some work last year, we did some workshops last year, we agreed that we would establish a working group to follow those up. The working group has met. It has met 3 times. It needs to get better at communicating the results of its meetings. I discovered last week, because we had a follow-up meeting with the group leaders who commissioned that work, and the group leaders were to a councillor saying, "Heh, I haven't heard about this, what's going on? Please tell me what work it's doing, because it's really not sufficiently visible." So we know we've got a piece of work to do around visibility, but the underlying work is taking place. And one of the things that did come out of, the other thing that came out of that meeting with group leaders last week is an agreement that there needs to be a joint member officer workshop on how the council rolls out its values. We had a soft launch of our corporate values last year. We want to firm that soft launch up, so to speak, and to actually start rolling it into some concrete actions. Given the discussions and the tenor around how we go, the best way to go about improving member officer relations, that needs to be a joint exercise so that members and officers have a shared understanding of what those values mean and what they look like in terms of behaviours. That is that's sitting with me. I'm going to try and get that arranged before the summer recess.
Thank you, Gareth. Are you happy with that answer, Councillor Parkhurst?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's obviously a work in progress, so look forward to seeing the outcome.
Sorry, Lisa.
Thanks, Chair. Just in relation to your first question, Councillor Parkhurst, in relation there was a duplication of information. There are two separate documents, so if you picked one up alone, that information would be contained. So if you just read one in isolation, at least you've got the same information. That's why it's in both. Okay.
Thank you, Lisa. Are there any other questions on this item? Councillor Ellis, please.
Thank you, Chair. My question is regarding page 61, and it's regarding the schools, the financial viability of schools, and it's just some of the content of the progress update is quite alarming, though it does identify that there needs to be a lot of support to protect the expenditure and the public funds that are safeguarded. It's around the scoring. The previous score was 20 and the current score is 25 and the target, as you see, is 15. It's just the increase in the score. Obviously, I appreciate it's to do with the school budgets, and like everything else, it's the shortfall in the money that as an authority we receive, but just a little bit of reassurance, I think, for us all of the actions being taken. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Gary, do you want to answer this question? No.
Whilst I'm not able to answer the specifics of Councillor Ellis's questions, I can provide or have the Chief Officer respond in a more fuller way if that helps. I mean, I think Councillor Ellis, it would not be inappropriate for us to not reflect on the situation in relation to school budgets. We have reflected on that, and that's why it's been increased. So I think it's right and proper that it has been increased. It's a position the Chief Officer for Education is comfortable with, and we will, and the information that will be provided will give a degree of assurance about where we are. But there, I'm equally as concerned around school deficits as you are.
I think you also said, Neil, in answer to a previous question, that you're going to be conducting a review of this, and that will be coming back on a 6-monthly basis, I think you said.
Yeah, there will be a mid-year review of the AGS anyway, so you'll get a further update in relation to that. There'll be further updates coming through anyway in relation to review of risk, corporate risk in particular, within the scrutiny process. So you see that as well coming back into the system.
Thank you. Gary, you wanted to make a point on this?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just further to Councillor Parkhurst's mention of future budget outlook and the need to progress at pace. Obviously, we had some high-level indications of our additional budget requirements in the 26-27 budget report. It's around about 25-26 million for the next 2 years. Those figures are currently being refreshed, and we will be reporting an update to Cabinet and Corporate Resources Scrutiny Committee in July, and that will be over a 5-year period. So that report will include an outline timeline for the budget process from now on in, and also a high-level budget strategy. However, it is important to note that there's still no indicative Welsh Government budget for 27-28 and beyond for us to base our funding on. which, as we're all aware, that's 70% of our funding, so it will be extremely challenging and difficult. But obviously, we need to work with what we've got at this stage.
Thanks, Gary. Are there any other questions from members? Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, Chair. Could I mention also as well, page 77, regarding the care provision, sustainability as well, with the current score of 16 and the target score of 4. Again, it's down to funding, isn't it? A lot of the issues, but I do think it is something that we need more detail on, if possible, Neil, because it is quite an issue, isn't it, for the council and the public, basically. So, and that's page 77. It's RSS54. But you'll see the scoring 16 and 4.
Thank you, Councillor, for the question. Is that something that you can answer now, or would you want to come back and
No, I can
provide us with a question and answer to the question offline?
Yeah, I mean, Councillor is quite right. It's slightly more fundamental than just an issue for Flintshire. All 22 local authorities have a significant pressure point in relation to social services and social care. Councillor Ellis will be aware of that anyway. What we do need to understand is, with the new administration in Cardiff, what their proposals are going to be in terms of developing their overall strategy and approach. They are working currently, that is Clyde, they're working currently to a 100-day plan. I must confess it doesn't say a great deal about social care in it. It says a lot about health, but not a lot about social care at this moment in time. But you have to acknowledge and accept that that is a 100-day plan. There will be further detail that will no doubt flow from that as the new administration becomes more established and becomes more aware of some of the wider challenges within local government. In particular, the point Councillor Ellis raises, I will approach the Chief Officer for Social Care for some further clarification around that. But there is, as Councillor Ellis notes, a national issue in relation to funding of care.
Also, on that point, it just feels that the target score is a long way off the current score. It does feel that it might be unrealistic to set a target score of 4. So it would be useful if we knew a little bit more about how the scores were arrived at on this particular point. Thank you, Neil. Any further questions? Anyone? No? Okay, in that case, can we go to the recommendations, which are on page 11? So there's 2 recommendations. One is to review the annual governance statement for 25-26, and also to recommend the annual governance statement for adoption by the council. Can I have a proposer for the recommendations, please? Councillor Healy, and the seconder, Councillor Ellis. Thank you. All those in favour of the recommendations, please show. Thank you. I can't see any. I think that was everybody. I can't see anybody. Are there any abstentions? No. Any against? No. Okay. Thank you. That was item 7. So we move on now to item 8, which starts on page 83. So this is the Audit Wales review of transformation. And the purpose of the report is to provide members, to inform members of the outcome of the Audit Wales review of the transformation programme. And I think Gareth, the Chief Officer for Governance, is going to speak to this item. Thank you, Chair.
So, Chair, the Audit Wales wanted to carry out a review of our transformation programme. They were on site and undertaking that work in July of last year. And the report represents a snapshot of what they found at that time. And at that time, that programme, whilst we had been talking about it, was underdeveloped. And Audit Wales said that it was insufficiently developed for them to be able to carry out any substantial review. They therefore issued a letter to us, and that letter contains a cautionary warning for us, highlighting the need for the council to develop a transformation programme in order to be able to avoid what we refer to as salami slicing approach of budget cuts that had taken place in previous years. If there's any comfort in misery, it's knowing that you're not alone, and those who keep abreast of such matters will have seen similar warnings from Audit Scotland in relation to Scottish authorities. However, and that was published only recently. However, as one might hope, we have not done, forgive the double negative, we have not done nothing. We have not been idle since July of last year. Interestingly, in July of last year, the organisation was interviewing individuals to create a programme management office to provide support to and take forward the transformation programme. Those people came into the organisation a few months later, and we've recruited another couple of people since. So we are now, as of I think April, up to full staff or up to the full complement that we expected to have in relation to the PMO, Programme Management Office. And it is fair to say that that is a good year or more behind where we had envisaged we would be when I brought a report through the democratic process to scrutiny and to Cabinet in July 2024. You know, I'd set out a phased funding plan that indicated the staffing levels that we expected to have, and as I said, we're good 12 months behind where we had anticipated being. What that has slowed us, that lack of capacity has slowed us, because part of the thing about the transformation programme is that sort of transformational work is I can say over and above the day job. It needs additional capacity because people are so focused on delivering services and or working towards that annual cycle of budget meetings that we wanted to look at some bigger issues and some things that we'd never been able, because they were multi-year issues and they would need more than 12 months to resolve. We'd never resolved them as part of the annual budget process because they wouldn't deliver savings in year. So we'd always sort of put them to one side. So they form the bulk of the first part of the strategic transformation programme. Though the people that we brought into the Programme Management Office are now getting those documented, and we're putting in place the sort of project management documentation and the discipline that you would expect and need to, and the governance to be able to take those projects forward. Some have been completed, but they're minor in the scale of things. In addition, we have worked with an outside organisation called Triple Value Impact to identify further projects. Those projects will need to be approved by members for inclusion within formal inclusion within the strategic transformation programme. The recommendations to that end will be going to scrutiny next week and then on to Cabinet thereafter. And we have identified within there a number of projects that we believe would be able to generate potentially up to around about £3 or £3.5 million worth of savings, working in conjunction with TVI. Hopefully they will be approved. That the governance process makes members the gatekeepers to the inclusion of projects within the transformation programme. In addition, there are a number of projects that TVI identified, but fairly said to us, well, actually, you can do those yourself. One was around, for example, mobile phones and possibly perhaps a more optimal framework contract let by Crown Commercial Services that might generate some further mobile phone savings for us. We can do that ourselves. It's an open framework. We don't need third-party assistance with that, and so we have a team in IT, looking at that. Another piece of work was around fees and charges, again, positing potentially some generating extra income. And there is a team within finance working on that at the moment. So we have taken those forward. There still needs to be more. Those are steps taken to try and deliver the target within this year's financial or this year's budget, to which Councillor Parkhurst alluded in an earlier item. We need to be identifying more and further savings for future years. Now, I've made quite a lot of reference within the report to the peer panel assessment, and that echoed the findings of Audit Wales, and made a significant recommendation that the organisation needed to increase its capacity at a very senior level, at a strategic level, to take forward the transformation, to lead and take forward the transformation programme, which currently sits with me. And as you might imagine, as the senior governance officer, there's a lot of governance issues within the organisation. And my capacity to be able to take forward transformation isn't sufficient alone. So there was a recommendation that was taken up by Cabinet in February of this year to appoint a senior a chief officer for transformation, and that is a piece of work that is in hand. The chief executive would be able to give more detail as to where that is at the moment, but I think my understanding is that the scope of the post has been drawn up, the services for which it will be responsible has been drawn up, so that we have a clear vision for the role, and that we are currently having that position evaluated prior to advertising it. So that is, I think, probably the last of the things that I can say in relation to the work that we have undertaken since July of last year. But I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Gareth. Thank you for the comments on that report. It seems very positive. Just a couple of questions from me before I open out to the room. I suppose I had a bit of a concern that the person leading the transformation team might not have a presence at chief officer level, but you're saying that's now being addressed. You're going to have a senior transformation officer at chief officer level. So that presumably that person will regularly attend chief officer team meetings, because which I think is important given the fact that it's such a crucial area of activity for the council. The other questions I had really were around just again about the resourcing of the team. The letter from Audit Wales suggested the funding for the team has been limited to 1 year. Is that the case, or is expected to acquire funding from perhaps some of the savings that it generates in future years? Are the people on that team, or the posts on that team, are they subject to a finite life? Are they on short-term contracts, for example? I just wanted to understand the basis of the team, how it was funded, and the sort of people that are in the posts that are in that team. Thank you.
I'll pick up both of those if I can. The new position will be a chief officer position. That is the intention. Yes. As at the moment that sits, that role sits with me, so it does have a presence at a chief officer level, because of course I am a chief officer and I'm a member of the team. It's just that my capacity to be able to do the work that I know and I can see needs to be done is limited by the other duties that also rest with my position. In addition to that, members will be familiar with the Strategic Executive Officer. They won't know her as that, they'll know her as Kelly Eldon-Jones, who is, whilst not within the Chief Officer team, is a senior officer responsible for big projects within the organisation. She also is leading alongside the Digital Transformation Programme Manager at a senior level. So there is some capacity there. There needs to be more capacity at that senior level to be able to take it forward with the pace that is required. Funding. The funding, and I don't want to be critical of the finding of Audit Wales. It is, I think, perhaps a slight misportrayal of a position that was adopted by the Corporate Resources Overview and Scrutiny Committee some time ago. I mentioned my report in July 2024. At the point where I was bidding for resources and trying to set up the governance structure, I took a report to that scrutiny committee before going to Cabinet. The scrutiny committee advised caution, didn't want to put money into unproven projects, which of course, bearing in mind a member's fiduciary responsibility, is appropriate. It was, however, a very cautious approach. Their recommendation was that we fund it for 1 year only. Now, this, the Programme Management Office is actually funded from a reserve, and I think, and the Corporate Finance Manager had actually set aside enough money to keep that office in place for three years. And so actually the pool of funding exists. So I think how Cabinet interpreted the recommendations was, well, look, let's do it. Let's have a look and make sure that the Programme Management Office is actually making good progress so that we're not throwing good money after bad, but the funding is there for a longer term. The posts have certainly been advertised for 3 years and appointed on the basis that they will be in place for 3 years.
Bit of clarification on the comments that Gareth made around Chief Officer appointment. That is to be determined on evaluation. So there is a conversation going on with myself and the Corporate Manager for HR, Sharon Carney, around the scale and dimension of that post. The place we want it to land, or would like it to land, is at Chief Officer level. But until that evaluation is concluded, we don't know whether it's going to get there or not. Either way, it will sit within either as a corporate manager or a chief officer. It will sit within chief officer team as an executive management team for this authority.
Thank you, Neil. Any other questions? Councillor Priest.
Thank you for that. Going to the actual speed of recruitment, I've got a slight concern on the speed of this, because the letter from yourselves to them was October. It got approved in February. We're now in June. What timescale is there now set for this new post to be actually advertised and for them to actually be in place? Because the timer is ticking, and Audit Wales, I would have thought, would want to see some progress. But at this point, there's nobody being put into post. Thank you.
Progress isn't reliant on the chief officer appointment. As Gareth explained, there are resources in the team that have reinforced the overall approach to driving the programme forward.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ellis, you had your hand raised. Did you have a question?
Yes, please. It's page 86, bullet point 1.08, where it alludes to the outside advisor and the potential savings of the 3 million, and then goes on to outline the staff that have been recruited and the good progress made in documenting the projects, leading to a budget target of 2 million being included within the budget for 2026-27. So are those costs come out of that saving that we're expecting, or are the costs for the advisor the additional staff, where are they separately? What is the cost, basically? What is the cost of saving the 3 million?
Okay, thank you.
Like I said, is it over? We were led to believe by Audit Wales that it's for 1 year, but Gareth's explained to us now that it's for 3 years. It's just, I wonder where the cost lies, basically.
Okay, thank you.
That makes sense.
Thank you. Gareth, would you like to answer that question?
I can answer some of that question, Chair. I can't give detailed answers as to cost. We have a strategic reserve. I bid for what used to be called the Invest to Save Reserve. I think I got the last of it, didn't I, at the time, just listening to Gary, because I put a bid for around, was it 750,000? It was in that ballpark. I can't remember, Chair. It was July 24. The report is online. So there was a total over 3 years of building up the level of resource. We anticipated over 3 years it would be 750,000. There was a reserve available for that at the time, and there is still a reserve, and I am drawing down against that reserve. I don't know exactly at the moment. I would need to check where it stands. The additional work identified with the external advisor, there are costs over and above that. And again, as part of the report to Cabinet, which will be going to scrutiny next week, so the agenda will be published today, I believe. There are costings identified within there. And that, but we would need to be, that will need an additional amount added to that reserve, or we take it out of the reserve and then top the reserve up later if there's a cash flow issue. But that would be over and above the cost that I have posited already for the Programme Management Office. One of the things that the peer panel assessors did say to us was whilst caution is understandable, and I've already referred to fiduciary responsibilities and so on, they encouraged us to be a bit bolder, I think it's fair to say, and it started encouraging us to invest, because if we don't, we're not going to make those savings, so we might have to invest. And this is an uncomfortable thing for local authorities to do, with a slightly greater margin of risk than we might hitherto have accepted. Basically, we need to be a bit bolder if we're going to do anything. It was a snapshot or summation of their advice on that issue.
Thank you, Gareth. And I think you confirmed that the funding is for 3 years, albeit it's come from a reserve. And you, as you say, you're drawing down that reserve. Councillor Ellis, does that answer the question that you raised? Yeah, you're happy with that? Okay, thank you. Any other questions from members? I've got a question from John. Over to you, John.
Yeah, so given where we are and in terms of moving the transformation programme forward, to what extent are there dependencies or factors that are outside the direct control of the council? The sort of pace would be dependent on, are there any? Or to what extent are there things that the council doesn't directly control?
Thank you, Chair. There are some things beyond the council's control. Clearly, whether or not we're able to recruit at a senior level is a question about where we are in the marketplace. There are a lot of people at the moment, a lot of councils at the moment recruiting for this sort of post. So we might find ourselves in quite a challenging marketplace, a recruitment market. In terms of the identified projects that we have, those are projects within our control, and I think most of the interdependencies are within our control. We are still at a very early stage in relation to some of those projects and identifying precisely the level of savings that might be achievable. Whilst we have ballpark figures, we haven't refined them. So those remain variables. They're within our control to a degree, but they remain variables within that programme. I talked in relation to the outside advisor TVI, and the work that the 6 now projects we plan to undertake with them are at the moment are forecast to achieve about £3.5 million worth of savings, probably slightly less now. So we have allowed ourselves, or trying to allow ourselves, a margin of error, quite a considerable margin of error, around how much we achieve in year in order to make sure we hit our £2 million target. Now, I talk of it in terms of a margin of error, but actually what it is it will be approval and setup processes, knowing that we will only make part year savings. So it isn't. So whilst there might be some variability around the level of savings, actually we also know that the longer we delay in getting those things set up and delivered, the less time we'll be saving. So therefore, the smaller the amount we will save within this financial year. And so the £2 million was a reasonably safe target, but we need to get a move on. Otherwise, even that reasonably safe target will evade our grasp if we don't quickly move into delivering that level of saving.
Thanks. But before I bring Martin in, can I just ask a question about the required level of savings for 27-28? I think in the Audit Wales letter it suggests it's around 29 million. Don't know if that's the correct figure, the budget figure for 27-28. That's what it says in the Audit Wales letter. That then brings me on to a question: is the transformation programme intended to deliver the majority of those savings, or is it really looking at? Are we expecting it to deliver a small proportion of that required level of savings? Does that make sense? Sorry.
I think, just looking to Gary, I think it was still around the £29 million mark for next year, aren't we?
Yeah, in the 26-27 form, we quoted 26.5, but we're currently refining those figures for reporting in July. So it'll be in that region, I'm sure.
I guess what I'm saying is the transformation programme's got a long way to go to be able to generate that level of savings, hasn't it? It's really got a motor. It's got to get from second gear into sixth gear at a pretty damn.
Yeah, and it's not quick. At the moment, we're not expecting that it would be generating the bulk of those savings now.
It will make a contribution.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Martin. I think you had a question.
I think it links into what you've just asked. I suppose it feels like a programme of small change, where you've put a PMO in rather than a programme that's really driving transformational change to deliver significant, transformation to the organisation and transformational major savings. And almost you need a strategic view of the strategic transformation that can deliver 26 million of savings, rather than a programme that's going to reduce mobile phone usage or whatever, which is a useful saving, but it's not going to deliver the big picture amounts that you need.
Oh, thank you, Chair. A number of let me go. We've got some people for whom this is new. I'll go back to the start, if I might, and then try and build up to make sure that everybody has a common level of understanding. Part of the governance structure for the transformation programme, whilst we have a programme management office to support and add capacity, every project is led by a chief officer, usually the relevant chief officer for that area, but not always. So Craig MacLeod as the Chief Officer for Social Services is leading on transformational projects within social services and so forth. That hopefully gives us that strategic, it gives us a level of strategic input to the programme to try and get us onto the bigger scale projects of the sort that we obviously need. Yes, some of the projects are quite small at the moment, and I think we're still finding our feet to a degree. We looked at a list with TVI. We looked at a list of about 40 different use cases. Given the financial pressures that we face, we picked the ones from there that we knew we could tackle soonest. There remain more that we can tackle and that get us into bigger levels of change, and they will hopefully deliver. They would deliver because they are more transformational at a more fundamental level. They would deliver larger scale savings, but they take longer because of their scale. So the focus on midterm, near to midterm, rather than those big long-term savings. However, that is how to put this. We've been doing service change in this council for a huge amount of time. And there are examples, even though they're not labelled transformational change, of huge service change that are saving us a large amount of money. If you look at the issues that we had, Chair, around the cost of the temporary housing bill, and then look at the work that the Chief Officer for Housing and her team have done to bring that bill down and get it under control. That's transformational change. It's not badged as transformational change, but it's transformational change because we're moving away from the use of bed and breakfast or hotel accommodation, which is expensive and unsatisfactory, into developing and delivering our own temporary accommodation stock. And we're building and buying and renting properties in order to be able to do that, which not only is cheaper, but also gives better outcomes for the people who have to live there. Because obviously, if you're in a hotel room, where do you do your homework if you're a school child, and so on and that kind of thing. So there is transformational work going on. That work has been going on under different headings for a long period of time. It needs to get faster and bigger, and we need to deliver. What is it, Neil, the Chief Executive, always talks in terms of scale and pace. That's what we need to do. We need to build that up, that scale and that pace. And the PMO is there to support the services in delivering it, because they're not the subject matter specialists. They're not going to be able to deliver that change themselves. So what we're trying to do is provide the ancillary support to people, the chief officers, to enable those chief officers to deliver at a greater pace and on a greater scale.
Gary, you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Jay. Just because I know councils present figures in different ways as regards to the budget. The figures quoted, I mentioned 25, 26 million, the Audit Wales report mentioned 29 million. That is purely our additional cost pressures that particular year. So it takes no account whatsoever of any uplift in council tax or any uplift in our Welsh Government grant, which are two core funding streams. So for every 1% uplift we got from Welsh Government, it's just under £3 million. And every 1% uplift in local taxation would be about 1.2 million. So obviously, depending on where those two end up, it'll be a lot less than 29, albeit it'll still be a significant ask of the council as well.
So it's a gross figure rather than net. Okay, thank you. Councillor Parkhurst.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We've heard a lot about the need for more scale and pace. I do note the reference to the bidding for the extra funding for the Chief Officer post was in 2024, and 2 years later it hasn't been advertised yet. I think that's indicative that we haven't had that necessary scale and pace. I think the The recommendation on page 83, which says that to note the letter from Audit Wales and the Council's progress with establishing a transformation programme, I think that is rather anodyne. I think in view of the debate, we need to add something to that along the lines of, whilst acknowledging that the scale and pace of the transformation process needs to be stepped up in order to meet the desired objectives. Thank you, Chair.
Are you proposing that that be added to the recommendation, those forms of words?
Yes, Chair.
Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Carberry. Okay, thank you. When we vote on the recommendation, then I'll ask for that. Are there any other questions or comments?
Could I just make a small correction, Chair? And I don't think it detracts for 1 minute from what Councillor Parkhurst has just proposed. The bid that I did in July 2024 was for the Programme Management Office. So those are lower level staff, not the Chief Officer level. At that point, we were still 2 years ago, we were still intent on trying to deliver this within existing strategic resource level. The recommendation to recruit at Chief Officer level came out of the PPA in late February. So there's a slightly different, the much quicker timescale in relation to actioning that recommendation. Like I say, I don't think it necessarily detracts from the resolution, but I just want members to have the facts and accurate.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Can I just be clear about the words, Councillor Parker? So I've got, whilst acknowledging that the scale and pace needs to be, and I've written accelerated. I don't know if that was the word you used.
It wasn't the word I used, but it has the same meaning. Thank you.
It needs to be accelerated to meet expectation. For that, can I just ask for people to vote in favour of that amendment before I give you the substantive recommendation? Are you happy to add the words whilst acknowledging that the scale and pace needs to be accelerated to meet expectations?
Chair, if I might, it's not an amendment. The officer's recommendations are nothing until they're picked up and moved by members. I had understood Councillor Parkhurst to be picking up my recommendation, moving it with his additional words, so it is actually the substantive motion.
In that case, I'll read the full recommendation with the addition. To note the letter from Audit Wales and the Council's progress with establishing a transformation programme, whilst acknowledging that the scale and pace needs to be accelerated to meet expectations. Okay with that? All in favour, please show. Thank you. Any against? No. Any abstentions? No. Okay, thank you. So that was approved. That was moved. So that was item 8. Item 9, which is on the panel performance assessment, and is set out on page 93 onwards. The purpose of this is to share the final panel performance assessment report and agree how the report will be shared with members. And I think it's going to be the Chief Executive, Neil, is it, who's speaking to this?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And as members will have already noted, there has been quite a lot of reference in the PPA to transformation as well. So I wouldn't propose to go over that in any level of detail, but quite happy to answer any questions. I'll just quickly take you through the report, and then if there are any questions, quite happy to answer those. So in terms of the regulatory framework, Local Government Tax Collection Wales Act is puts the duty on the council in relation to the PPA. It looks at the way the council exercises its functions effectively, uses resources economically, efficiently and effectively, and there's robust governance arrangements in place for securing all of the above. Important to note, it wasn't an audit or an inspection, or did it seek to duplicate any work of the council, and that is important. But it was about supporting the council to understand how it could improve the extent to which they're meeting the above performance requirements. It took a 3-stage approach: preparation, assessment, and recommendations and follow-up. two additional areas that were put in. We were, we were entitled to put those in. You don't have to, but we put two in. One of them around workforce planning and working with partners to address budget pressures. So meetings were extensive, both internal and external stakeholders. The list is set out in your report at para 105. The panel confirmed that the council was meeting its functions effectively, using its resources economically, efficiently and effectively, and there was effective governance in place for securing that. So that's positive. However, there are a number of recommendations made at page 115. I'll praise you some of those in relation to the report: dedicated workforce and strong external partnership with significant risks regarding its medium-term financial sustainability. We've touched on that already in this meeting. Corporate narrative in relation to that was external dependency on local government settlement. And there is an urgent need for internal strategic transformation. And then finally, critical risks around financial resilience and transformation programme that require urgent traction and impetus, and a sustained political culture. And a strained political culture. These issues are disproportionately absorbing significant member and officer capacity, particularly in terms of scrutiny arrangements. So the report is before you, Chair, with an action plan at the back. The action plan, correct me if I'm wrong, Lisa, is due for a major update in July. So I know officers are working behind the scenes to provide those updates into our internal audit colleagues. So I have to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Can I just ask a couple of questions to start off? One relates really just to helping me understand what's the process for reviewing progress. Does the action plan go to Chief Officer team? Is it going on a regular basis? And then a couple of just detailed questions about the deadlines. I guess it's difficult to avoid not repeating some of the points that were made on the last item, I suppose, which is that on page 118, you've got an action. There is an action that's described as developing and publishing a strategy and plan for transformation that sets out the strategic context, etc. And the due date is March 2027. So that feels like quite a long way off, and that'll be too late for the budget for 27-28. So it does feel again as though the potential for making savings is being pushed further and further into the distance. Also on the deadlines, on the previous page 117, there's an action scope out the timetable for review of overview and scrutiny committees, March 2026, and another one for June 2026. I just wondered where we are in terms of process for those. Have we hit the deadline for the first, and are we on time for the second? Thanks.
So I will start with the scrutiny first. The review of scrutiny is a large piece of work for the Democratic Services team, who are currently still partway through the review of the Constitution. So it will need to come in sequence after that because of capacity. Fingers crossed, we have a meeting on Monday. Well, we have a meeting on Monday of full council. Fingers crossed, we will be resolving the review of the Constitution at that meeting, which will then clear the decks for the review of scrutiny. But the timetable is looking more like the end of this calendar year now rather than sooner. And in relation to the transformation strategy, it was due this month. Well, we had a working deadline for this month. I'm afraid it hasn't been met. At the moment, I am still hoping that we would be able to get something, a first draft, available in June. Sorry, when I say this month, I'm still thinking it's May. It was due in May. I'm hoping to be able to get something in June.
In terms of reporting in, Chair, and it's, I mean, this is, I guess, entirely up to this committee. the general view was we were reporting formally on this once a year. I tend to think it might need a mid-year report, but it's entirely up to you.
I wouldn't want to put words into members' mouths, but I'm sure we will welcome a mid-year review report. Would that be welcomed, Councillor Parkhurst?
Yeah, Chair, that was one of the concerns I had in the recommendation on page 93. I'm just finding it. It's where it says to note the actions set out to address the recommendations, and progress will be reported against these actions on a regular basis. That's not a smart, time scale. There needs to be something specific in there about what the expectation is on reporting, and if it's 6 monthly, that might be acceptable. I do note that there are many of these actions for which there aren't dates. You've mentioned some of them, but there's also page 121. There are dates not set for reviewing the operating model for the strategic management capacity and the roles of a chief officer team. This is quite a fundamental thing to sort of set the top structure. But we don't have dates, and I think it all feeds into that narrative that perhaps there isn't sufficient impetus, and we need to accelerate that, as we said earlier. Thank you.
You okay with those? Yep. Any other questions from councillors? Lisa.
Chair, if I can just come in, thank you. So in terms of reporting, the plan is that we will report quarterly to Cotton Cabinet and programme boards, and the intention was originally that we would report to Governance and Audit Committee as part of the external assurance report that we do on an annual basis. That was where we were going to report it in. However, if you want a mid-year review, then we can bring that forward as well. I'd still include it in the annual report, but we can bring forward a mid-year review. I'm just conscious of the timescale. We're due now, and that would be due in March. So it is quite tight to bring a mid-year one, but I'm happy to do that if you want.
Okay, a mid-year review would be around September though, wouldn't it?
But should we say November, because that gives us time, and then we'd give one in March.
Would we be happy with those timescales, members? Okay. Are there any other questions or comments from members? No. Are you happy with the wording as it is, Councillor Parkhurst? If regular basis has been clarified to include a half-year report? Thank you. In which case, I'll read out the recommendations which are on page 93. So the first one's to note the panel performance assessment report and the recommendations made. Second one's to note the actions set out to address the recommendations from the panel performance assessment. Progress will be reported against these actions on a regular basis. Can I have a mover for the recommendations, please? Can I have a mover for the recommendations? Councillor Parkhurst.
Chair, sorry, could you just put in their specific reference to the 6 monthly review? Thank you.
Okay. Against these actions on a 6 monthly basis. Can I have a mover for the recommendations, please? Councillor Parkhurst. And seconder, Councillor Ellis. Okay, thank you. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. Any abstentions? Any against? No. Okay, thank you. That was agenda item 9. Agenda item 10, which is on page 131, is the internal audit annual report. And this is coming before us to inform us of the outcome of all audit work carried out during 25-26 and to give the annual internal audit opinion on the standard of internal control, risk management and governance within the council. And I think this is going to be introduced by Lisa. Over to you, Lisa.
Thank you, Chair. And for the new members here today, just to give some clarity on the purpose of the report. So as required under the statutory requirements, my position is required to deliver an annual internal audit opinion. That report then informs the annual governance statements, which you've already received today. Within the report that you have here today, you'll have my opinion, the summary of the work that we've undertaken during the year to support that opinion, and a compliance to say that we conform with the global internal audit standards in public sector UK, and as a result, we have the quality assurance and improvement programme in place. My report goes into details about the governance framework. It covers the corporate governance arrangements, information governance, risk management, internal controls, and performance and improvement. Reports highlighted where we've had independent external assurance has been received in relation to the adequacy of governance arrangements. My report goes into the level of coverage of the team during the year and a summary by portfolio and the assurance levels that we have provided. The Chief Officer for Governance mentioned earlier about the resources within the team. We were limited resources, so we did have to adjust our plan accordingly this financial year. And what we did was we focused all of our resources on the high risk areas that we felt that we needed to give attention to, which meant some of the reviews that were due for review this year, we didn't review, based on the fact that in previous years we've known that their assurance opinions were sound and good. On that basis, however, the assurance opinions remain the same as last year. So for the year ending the 31st of March 2026, based on the work of internal audit and its external regulators, it's my opinion that Flintshire County Council has an overall adequate, effective framework of governance, risk management and internal control. Within you've got your Appendix A, which is with the report in detail. Within that report, you will find that it obviously goes into the why and how I've produced that basis for my opinion. It tells you why I've covered all those governance, risk management, internal control areas. There were no limitations to the scope of our work this year. And in terms of the NFI and anti-fraud and corruption arrangements, I've included a summary of the work that we presented at the last meeting in relation to the anti-fraud work that we do within the organisation. And just to summarise that, just over £406,000 has either been identified or recovered as part of that piece of work. In addition to that, there are appendices within the report covering our quality assurance and improvement programme against the global standards, and a summary of our assurance opinions that we provided during the year, all of which you've been aware of during the year, a summary of our work, and then lastly, just to reinforce that the 3 lines of assurance to the organisation on what we need to adopt. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you for those comments and thank you for the report, very comprehensive. Are there any questions on the report? Councillor Parkhurst? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Lisa, for a very comprehensive report. I'd like to ask a couple of questions. I'm looking at page 167, which is the number of red, amber, green audits for the year 2025-26. Do the 2 red audits under the Education and Youth portfolio, specifically for Flint High School and the EOTAS, which is the children educated outside the school's environment, are they included within those figures, or are they outside those, outside that period? That's my first question. Perhaps you could answer that one first.
So EOTAS is included within that one. The Flint High School was commissioned whilst we started the review, we completed it, and then a second part was instigated. So that report is in the 26-27 assurance opinion.
Thank you, Lisa. So we've got no green audits in the 2025-26 year. We have some amber ones, quite a few amber ones, and we've got 3 red ones. So I'm just surprised that there aren't any green audits in the whole of the organisation that has been audited. And I wonder, therefore, whether the comment, I'm just trying to find it, on the audit opinion on page 140, where we have an adequate and effective framework, governance, risk management and internal control. I'd just like further comments on that. I understand the framework of governance and risk management, but I'm not convinced about the internal control. Otherwise, I thought we would have seen fewer reds and more greens. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. If I can answer that then. So it's quite unusual to get a green assurance opinion, if I'm honest. And as I said originally, what we've done this year is we've focused our resource on the areas that we particularly, we're all short on resource, so we focused where the money was this year. So those are the areas that we've looked at. Again, there's a balance between amber red and amber green. So we've still got a good area. It's still split as what it was last year. What we've also done, I think it's still, this is just on the reviews that we've done, and obviously external audit have done other reviews. So I have to base my assurance opinion, not just on just my work, but everything else that I'm aware of that's going on in the organisation, which I feel is reasonable to provide that opinion. In addition to that, in terms of the internal control, we have done some additional pieces of work in relation to the workforce conference that we've had recently. So we're just re-emphasising what everybody else's role within the organisation is, that we can't get round everywhere in terms of auditing, but as service managers and individuals, you can. Therefore, just re-emphasising what internal controls arrangements are in place, and some questions for them to ask themselves. However, that being said, at the moment, that I'm comfortable with the arrangements that we have.
Does that answer the question you raised? Councillor Healy, I think you had your hand raised.
It's fine. I think my question probably relates to the next item, not this one. Okay, sorry, sir.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Priest.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. This is a really good report. Very, very interesting. I've got a very simple question. So as an ex-Estlin inspector, we used to use a grading system when we used to speak about things. We used to have unsatisfactory, we had adequate, we had good, standard, and of course we had excellent. In your opinion, what you've put here is an adequate standard. Are you using the same sort of grading system as Estlin would have used? So as a whole, the council is coming out as adequate. Thank you, Chair.
I think if you look at every internal audit opinion, they never go any more than adequate, because that's, we can't say that everything is, because we haven't looked at everything, but we take assurance from what we've looked at into the external arrangements. Adequate is a standard terminology that we would use. In terms of the individual reviews, which you're talking about in terms of Estlin, on page 166 of the report, that gives what we would look at as an individual assurance opinion, and that's where we give a reasonable, some assurance, limited assurance. So that's, but overall we would give an adequate one, because it's a summary of everything.
Are you happy with that answer to your question? Yeah. Okay. I think we've touched on this subject in the past when we talked about the word adequate. And I think I remember saying, if you go and have a meal in a restaurant and you say it's adequate, you know, adequate means not very good, doesn't it? But it's the way in which it's used. It's a feature of audit reports, both internal and external. You know, it doesn't not meant to be suggesting that a very critical stance has been taken. Any other questions or comments? Can't see any on the screen. Any hands raised? Oh, Councillor Johnson, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. As somebody who's attended audit committee since exactly that audit committee it first was when I went on it, this is a report which has come every single time. And I really pay, I think Lisa and her team do a phenomenal job in giving the detail that goes with it. I don't know how many hours it's gone and taken, but it's always substantial. He never hides anything. One of the things I think this year I'm quite interested in is the introduction. We haven't talked to this as a governance and audit committee after all. It's just that you've defined what internal audit is, you set out your professional standards, and you've given that declaration for independence. That, I assume, underpins all the work that you do for this council as internal audit. Those are standards that you apply for all the work that's done there.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, absolutely. And it's the standards that we have to comply in terms of the global internal audit standards. So it's our professional body that we have to comply with. We have to be independent in terms of where we sit as the organisation. We have to act independently and objectively. Obviously, I report direct to Gareth, Chief Officer for Governance. However, I also meet on a regular basis with the Chief Exec and the leader of the organisation as well, and accessible to anybody really. So that's where my independence comes in.
Question, because the one I've been dying to ask for a long time. Do you find it difficult, make it pointing out things that issues that you have raised, to go and talk to the chief executive or the chief officers, or you're absolutely frank and blunt the way you are with us?
That was you, Lisa, with that one.
I would like to think I'm open and frank, and I don't hide anything. Yeah, we have a good relationship, and I'm able to explain, raise any concerns if I have any.
Because sometimes they say things I don't particularly like.
I think the audit committee in the past has sought assurance or reassurance that about the independence of the chief internal auditor. The chief internal auditor can have direct access to the chief executive and express concerns or views, without having to go through a line management structure. So we've had that assurance in the past, I think. Yeah. Councillor Parkhurst.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I too acknowledge Lisa's professionalism and that of her team, which is outstanding. I just want to really go into a little bit more again about the internal control. That I do get that the overall opinion is overall it is effective and adequate. I'm just a little concerned because some of the issues which have been raised this last year relate to safeguarding, children's safeguarding. We have seen it with the shortcomings in the DBS check process, which you identified, Lisa. We've seen it in Flint High School, which isn't part of this year, but nevertheless, the issues go back to the year in question. And we've seen it in the EOTAS, the children being educated outside the school system. And whilst that is one aspect out of many aspects that you are looking at, it seems to me to be a very high weighting, because we are all corporate parents, and the children are our most precious resource, and what we need to look after. So I'm kind of happy or content with the overall opinion, because I respect your judgment. But I do think we just need to be very aware of the safeguarding matter, and we will come on to this when we look at the audit reports. But we need to keep it in high focus. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parkhurst. Any other comments or questions? Martin Lewis, over to you.
Sorry, cyber risk got mentioned earlier as having quite a high risk and not reducing, and it seems to be the external body reviews cyber, but we seem to be slow making progress, or not. On page 149, there seems to be challenges in getting to cyber essentials, or in reviewing some of the systems.
So
over to you, Lisa.
Yeah, so obviously we have to resource in terms of meeting those requirements. We did have an external review on cybersecurity. Sorry. We did have a review on cybersecurity, which will come back to the next meeting. So I'm just waiting to look through that report at the moment. But it's a process really in terms of how we meet those. I think, Gareth, do you want to come in a little bit further on that one? Because that's your area, isn't it?
It is. Thank you, Chair. Chair, we're never going to be anything other than red with our risk around cybersecurity. And the reason I say that is because at the moment there are international state actors or state-sponsored cyber criminals attacking our institutions as a result of decisions at a national level around support for the Ukraine and so on, that has made us targets for Russian and Chinese sponsored cyber criminals. In that context, we're never going to be less than red. It's bizarre that something like that should result in an escalated risk for us, but it does. And we have seen, I saw a report yesterday from the organisation that monitors our cyber reports and our incidents for us, and it refers in there specifically, to a Russian-sponsored, Russian state-sponsored cyber gang that tried to access our systems within the last month. So yeah, it's like we have stepped through the looking glass, it feels like sometimes, in relation to this, because you'd have thought, well, why are they bothered with a local authority? It's at a state level. It is a, what do they call it? It's a, they don't call it a Cold War, do they, anymore? They call it, it's a war without being at war. And we are in that situation, and we are regarded as legitimate targets in those hostilities. So yeah, we invest continually in this as an organisation. I've never had anything other than the fullest level of support that I could wish for from councillors across the board in relation to cyber work. We have a new cyber engineer starting next week. We will have a technician starting to support him shortly thereafter. We are investing in, continually investing in technology, whether that be hardware or software, to improve our defences. And indeed, only yesterday, Aled Griffiths, as the infrastructure manager, and I were planning an exercise within the organisation to look at cyber resilience and what might happen if the worst were to occur and our defences were penetrated. So it is something to which we give a high level of continuous resource and attention.
Thank you, Gareth. Thank you for that. Am I correct in saying as well that in internal audit, didn't you recruit a computer auditor or a systems auditor at some point? Have I got that wrong? Okay, all right.
Lisa kept money to one side to pay for specialist external IT.
Right.
So you are correct in that there is specialist IT capability, because Lisa kept money to one side to buy that in, although she didn't recruit it herself.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments, members? I don't see any hands raised. Okay, in that case, we'll go to the recommendations. The recommendations are on page 131. Are you happy with the wording of the recommendation, Councillor Parkhurst? Yeah, okay, thank you. So the recommendation is the committee is requested to consider the report and receive the internal audit annual opinion. Can I have a proposer for that, please? Councillor Healy, and Councillor Carberry is seconding. Thank you very much. All those in favour of the recommendation? Thank you very much. Any abstentions? No. Any against? No. Okay, thank you. So that was approved. That was agenda item 10. Thank you again for the report, Lisa. Agenda item 11 is the report subject is Audit Wales, Flintshire County Council, detailed audit plan for 2026. And the purpose of this is to review the Audit Wales audit plan for the council, which sets out the proposed audit work for the year, along with timescales, costs, and the audit teams responsible for carrying out the work. I think the Chief Executive has got to say a few words first. Is that right?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Very brief on this one. These are the areas that Audit Wales are proposing to review. Two main sections in 103. The financial statements, an audit of financial statements. That is within pages 178 and 186 of your report, and then some specific work around performance audit work set out in page 190. That's around road maintenance decision making and effectiveness of project outcomes. And finally, the proposals there in relation to fee rates for the work for support from Audit Wales for that work. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Neil. Emma Woodcock is online. Did you want to say anything in respect to this report?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, probably the only thing is, just like Neil has said, really, from a financial audit perspective, on page 170, where we've got 1.03, that's probably important to note those as sort of the main areas of risk that we've identified from a financial audit perspective. And then on 171, where you've got 1.04, those are the three areas that we're proposing for our performance audit work. And I suppose I should highlight that we've looked at materiality. So materiality from a group perspective will be 6.46 million. And then the trivial level, which is where at that level, we report anything above that back to committee. And that will, for the group, that will be 0.323 million. And I'm just happy to take any questions, really, if anyone's got any.
Thank you, Emma. Can I start the round of questioning? I've got a couple of questions on the timescale and the timetable. So it's good to see that the plan is to complete the work by the end of September, the work on the statement of accounts. I know in the past there have been difficulties, partly because I think there's been some resourcing issues within Audit Wales. So I wanted to know if those issues have now been resolved, and therefore are you confident that you will be able to complete the work in accordance with that timetable? Leading on from that, really, I don't know whether this is your area of responsibility within Audit Wales, but we've often found useful the financial sustainability reports that Audit Wales produce. I don't know whether it's the intention of Audit Wales to revisit that subject and produce another report sometime in the future. And thirdly, the third question, I guess, for me is relating to the fees. The fee level increase is 5.3%. Is there some justification that you can give as to why an above inflation increase of that magnitude is to be levied by Audit Wales, or is to be set by Audit Wales? Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you for those questions. So in answer to the first one, I'd say, yeah, we should be able to meet the timetable that we've set out. In actual fact, this year, we're probably a bit ahead of where we have been in the last few years. We are getting back to where we were sort of pre-COVID. We've been able to do most of the planning and a lot of the interim sampling, which is something we haven't been able to do in the last few years. So that's a really good tick from our perspective. In terms of the second point then about the financial sustainability, I'm not actually aware that we are going to be doing that report again this year. But what I can do is I can ask my performance audit colleagues for a definitive answer, and I can get back to you on that one, if that's okay. And then I think in terms of the fees, all I can say is that obviously we've got an annual fee scheme that goes out to consultation. And obviously the consultation came back in. Our original consultation was to be a bit higher than 5.3%, I think, originally. And then based on the consultees that we had back in, we set that down to an average increase of 5.3. So Flintshire, given its reputation in terms of the financial accounts and performance audit work, you'll see that your fee is only increased by 5.3, which is the average, whereas some other authorities will have increased by more than 5.3. So that's sort of based on the level of work that we need to do and the skill set that are required to do that work, so that we can absolve the Auditor General's statutory responsibilities.
Okay, thank you, Emma. Councillor Healy, you've got your hand raised.
Thank you, sir. Emma, am I right in thinking that this is an area where our officer team was commended on the work that it's done as an example of good practice, and that one of our officers, Chris Taylor, was asked to give a national presentation? And if that's the case, I'd like to come back again if I may, Chair.
Yeah, sure. So in terms of the financial audit work that's undertaken, which is the area that I'm the manager for, I can't really talk about the detail of the performance audit work because the manager's not available today. But yeah, Chris was invited to talk at our recent good practice exchange to talk about the working papers and the governance structure that's set up in terms of the accounts preparation.
Thank you. If yes, I come back again, Chair, why I think this is particularly commendable and worthy of note by our committee is because we are an extremely low-funded council with reduced resources and reduced staffing. And so it is really significant that we have managed to achieve this and that we are an example to other authorities that are much better funded and staffed than we are. So I really do think this is an indicator of good management as far as Flintshire is concerned. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Healy. No, and I endorse entirely your praise for Gary, Chris and the rest of the finance team in terms of being able to deliver statements of accounts, which are very, very complex these days, and to deliver those to a high standard. I think Emma was suggesting that were we not providing accounts to such a high standard, in fact, our audit fee might go up, I think was what she was sort of indicating as well also. So perhaps that's another advantage.
Yes.
They're really
sorry for speaking over you then, Chair, but yes, that is what I was intimating.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Any other further comments or questions, Councillor Parkhurst?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Do we have any input into the topics to be audited by Audit Wales, or is this set before us? I know that the recommendation is to endorse, which sort of implies that we might have, you know, some sort of input into what's discussed, or do we just get told what is going to be audited and have to accept it? Because I would have thought, like you raised, something about financial resilience would be very appropriate.
I think a draft of this will have been shared with officers at some point. Is that right? Asking a question, I know we can answer that. And comments would have been sought by officers at the council into the audit plan. As I say, I guess Emma's going to take away the issue about financial sustainability and come back to us with an answer on that one offline.
I can come in there, Chair, if you want. So what happens is we prepare the report. Obviously, in terms of the financial statement work, it's very much based on the planning that we undertake, and that gives us sort of areas of risk. So in that report where you've seen the significant risk, that would be there as standard. So any local authority plan that you picked up would have that. And then in terms of the area of focus, that's just where we have looked through our planning documents and we see those areas as areas that warrant a bit more attention for opinion purposes. And then in terms of the performance audit areas, what we do is I'm going to get the terminology wrong because we always abbreviate to an ARA, which effectively is a risk assessment. So we risk assess there by having conversations with the council, and then we put forward proposals in terms of the areas that we would like to look at. And so I think those have been discussed with the council. And I think at the moment the plan is quite high level on some of those areas, but once Carwyn and the team get into the detail of those areas, then we'll obviously have those conversations with officers so that we can scope that up in terms of getting the best impact, if you like, for the authority.
Thank you, Emma. Thanks for that. Any other comments or questions, Councillor Dries?
Just for clarification, I can read it in very small print here. It says, this fee shown in this document excludes VAT. So if we added VAT onto that, are we talking about over £500,000 in fees? Thank you, Chair.
Emma, are you able to answer that?
To be honest, yes, we would be that, but I think I might get this wrong. I'll come back to you with the answer, but I think there's something about local government and VAT. So I can come back to you on that one if that's okay.
Well, I think the council's able to reclaim the VAT, but I'll ask Gary to make a comment.
Yeah, our local government authority can reclaim the full amount of that back. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Can't see any on the screen. Don't see any hands raised in the room. In that case, can we go to the recommendation, which is on page 169, that the committee endorse the Audit Wales detailed audit plan for 2026. Can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Healy, and the seconder, Councillor Carberry. Thank you. All those in favour of the recommendation, please show. Thank you. Any against? Any abstentions? No. Okay, so that's approved. Thank you very much. Thank you again, Emma, for the report and for your comments on answering the questions. Thank you. So item 12 starts on page 199. This is a report on action tracking, and its purpose is to inform the committee of the actions resulting from points raised at the previous audit committee meetings. And I think Lisa's going to introduce this report.
Thank you. Yes, just to confirm, and clarify for new members, this report is a standing item report which comes back to each committee. It's a summary of all of the actions raised by committee and the responses to those actions, which is detailed within the appendix of this particular paper. Happy to take any questions if there are any, Chair.
So yeah, so some of the comments, some of the actions date back to quite some time, some going back as far as March 2023. So I wondered whether there was likely to be any report coming back on those in the short term.
Thank you, Chair. I think the actions that you're referring to, there is a number in there that have been raised during the couple of years. And unfortunately, Chief Officer for Governance, it's the one in relation to the investigation. I know you've given a verbal update, haven't you? But it's just resource in terms of the actual report. Sorry.
Sorry, Gareth, we put you on the spot there a little bit.
No, I was aware of it. I'm still aware of it. How to put this, Chair? I'm undertaking not only my own responsibilities, but also the responsibilities that will now form the role for a whole of the Chief Officer. Finding the opportunity to do the work in relation to an issue which hopefully I was able to give the committee assurance is resolved, feels very low priority, if I can put it that way. It's one of those things though, Chair, where I probably just need to get on with it and do it, and not just put the amount of time into it that I can spare rather than the amount of time that I think it might require, and just get it done and closed off. So, Chair, I'll do it before the July committee.
Thank you, Gareth. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Can't see any hands raised on the screen. None in the room. Okay, in that case, we'll go to the recommendation on page 199, which is we have requested to accept the report. Can I have a mover for the recommendation, please? Thank you. And a second, Councillor Carberry, and a second, Councillor Ellis. All those in favour of the recommendation, please show. Thank you. Any abstentions? No. Any against? No. Okay, so that's approved. So that was item 12. Item 13, which starts on page 203, is the forward work programme. We're asked to consider the forward work programme of the Internal Audit Department. I think this is you again, Lisa.
It is, Chair. It's the forward work programme of the committee, not Yeah, okay. So this isn't your opportunity as a committee to review your forward work programme. Make sure that you're comfortable with the reports coming and that they are in the right months, or whether you want any reports moving. So I'm happy to take any questions, Chair, if you have any.
Councillor Healy.
Thank you, sir. I'm just wondering if, with regard to the forward work programme, if this committee is an appropriate committee to monitor the council's obligation to achieve net zero by 2030, which was something that was supposed to be, I think, within the remit of the Climate Change Committee, not that he actually did it. But we don't have that committee now, and we don't actually have a cabinet member who has climate change within his title as such. And I'm just wondering if the issue of our journey towards net zero has fallen off the radar, which I think would be, well, wrong, quite frankly. So maybe it comes within environment and economy, but I personally feel that it is a matter that is of such importance that it ought to be something that is relevant to ourselves as well. So I'd wish to ask a question about how this is actually being monitored and scrutinised. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Healy. I'm looking to one of the officers to respond to that.
The officers were just discussing whether that was a political issue, Chair, for the members to respond. I can describe the process, Chair, and stick to issues of process. There is the committee coordinating working group, is there not, that is chaired by the chair of the Governance and Audit Committee, and one of the roles of the CWCG is to ensure that cross-cutting issues such as climate change are being addressed by scrutiny and the audit committee. So it's about coordination, but also about making sure that it is being addressed. That, Chair, is the process.
So we could potentially tackle it that way. Address this particular issue about progress on achieving climate change targets. In other words, it's an item to be discussed at the coordinating.
It is an item to be discussed. I think I don't go to every scrutiny committee, Chair, so I don't know the extent to which other chief officers have been held to account in relation to the work on climate change in their areas. Within my own portfolio, because I wanted to be transparent. I want to give this emphasis. I want to be transparent, and I want to make the process of holding me and my services to account easier. We have prepared a portfolio carbon reduction plan. I think that will be the first portfolio carbon reduction plan within the council. But I put it all into one place just to make it easier. Others will, will be doing work on it, but it may not. It may be in separate documents. So I'm not saying they're not doing the work. I've done that myself just to try and give some visibility and to try and make that process a little easier. If it works well with my portfolio, it might be adopted across the board, Chair. I don't know. But yes, I think I haven't been asked those questions. I've done that. I will be reporting that to committee so that committee can see that. Rather than waiting to be asked, I've done that voluntarily. I think others are looking at this issue, but as I say, I'm not entirely sure because I don't go to those committees.
Councillor Healy, you've got your hand raised again. Did you want to come back?
Yes, thank you, sir. I'm not sure that my question was a political question, but what I am asking is the item that I raised about our journey towards net zero. considered to be important enough to merit the attention of this committee as a future agenda item and possible item on the forward work programme?
I guess this is a question about who would take responsibility for pulling together such a report, as one presumably doesn't exist at the present time. A council-wide report doesn't probably exist. Would this be better if I took it to the coordinating work committee or whatever it's called? Forget its full title.
CWCG is the acronym. CWCG, the Committee Work Coordinating Group. It's not the easiest title, I know, but here we are. We have the council as a whole has a carbon reduction strategy, doesn't it? A climate change strategy. It has a climate strategy manager, Alex Ellis. Alex is one of the people who is due to attend meetings of the CWCG in order to give, to be able to answer questions and to give that group the necessary visibility, and so that we can put it in there. I would suggest, Chair, that if it's something that you wish to take forward, that you do pick it up at the next meeting of the CWCG. I'm trying to recall the date for that. I think there's one due within the next 2 to 3 weeks from memory. I can have a look in my diary if you need, Chair.
Councillor, are you happy if I raise it at the next meeting of the CWCG?
Yes, I am, but I can see that we're getting rather hesitant and guarded answers here over something that I think is really should have a higher profile, and I'm surprised that we don't seem to be wanting to pick it up as something that we discuss at this meeting.
Chair, I don't have the full picture, so I don't want to, if my answers seem hesitant or guarded, that's because I'm conscious I don't have the full picture and I don't want to say anything that is inaccurate or incorrect in ignorance.
If you're happy, Councillor, here, I will raise it at the next
Maybe it's something that we should have a better picture and handle on.
Well, we'll record that in the minutes as something that needs to be addressed. But as I say, I'll address it with the relevant officer, because you're talking really about a council-wide approach, aren't you, to this? And I'm not sure that exists at the moment. So I'll pick that up at the CWCG meeting. Any other comments or questions? Oh, Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, Chair. Would it be possible, please, to add a further update and report on the, it's on the next agenda item. It's the internal audit, which the red report on education other than schools, which also incorporates the out-of-county spends, out-of-county budget and overspend. Due to the significance of the red report, which is in the next agenda item, I would like to see a further update on the progress that's recommended within the next report, if that could be included in maybe, I don't know, 6 months or sooner.
I think that would be something that we would be recommending when we come to that next item.
Okay, all right. It's done. Okay. Perhaps that should, agenda item 13, perhaps should have come after the next agenda item, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
That could be mentioned, thank you.
Any other comments or questions, Councillor Priest?
Thank you, Chair. It's just a question really on the 27th of January, you've got the risk management report and the risk management framework. Now, if that's anything to do with budgets and what our risks are, shouldn't that be earlier on in the year so something can possibly be actioned before the budget is completed and signed off in January. So I would see it earlier than January 27th, which is actually after the budget's been set. Thank you, Chair.
Is that for you to answer, Lisa?
Thank you, Chair. So the report that comes here, the framework is a review of the actual framework. So that's the policy documents. So that's it's standard for that to do at that time. In terms of the report, that's the report that comes at the end of the year. Individual reports will be going to overview and scrutinies in relation to the risk. So that will be in the public domain. It's just that this report is in the opportunity to have the assurance that those arrangements are working effectively. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Can't see any on the screen. No hands raised, no hands raised in the room. In that case, can we go to the recommendation? Recommendation on page 203 is that the committee considers the draft forward work programme and approve amendments necessary, that the internal audit, performance and risk management in consultation with the chair and vice chair of the committee be authorised to vary the forward work programme between meetings as the need arises. Can I have a mover for the recommendations, please? Councillor Parkhurst, a seconder. Can I second? Chair. Councillor Healy, thank you. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. Any abstentions? No. Any against? No. Okay, so that has been approved. Thank you. Item number 14, agenda item 14, is the internal audit progress report. The purpose is to present to the committee an update.
Apologies for interrupting, but we are almost at the 2-hour mark. This is a substantial item, albeit at the end of the agenda. I think it is worthy of proper consideration without a pressure of full bladders. And so, can I request a 10-minute break, please?
Yes, okay. I think that's sensible. Yes, okay. Thank you. We'll have a 10-minute comfort break. Can we back at what time is it? Just before 12 o'clock. Back in about 8 minutes past 12. Is that okay? Thank you. We're on item 14. It starts on page 209, and it's an internal audit progress report. And it's going to be Lisa who's going to be introducing this report. So I'll hand over to Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is my progress report of the work that we've completed since we last met. There are a number of areas in this report, Chair, and I'm just wondering, obviously, everybody's interested to review Appendix 3. So if I keep that to the end and I cover the rest of the report first, give you opportunities to ask any questions, and then we'll go on to that part, if that's okay.
Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, Chair. So the report is the standard report. So it identifies the reviews that we've completed, anything that is a red report or a red amber report. Within 104 of your covering report, it highlights the actions and the overdue actions. What I would say, there is a reduction in the overdue actions and the number of actions we've raised since we last met. What I'd also share with you that we've introduced an implementation panel. So what we're going to do is, for any red or amber red reports, we will have an implementation panel which will bring together key officers, not just the service managers, any key officers across the authority where we feel that maybe some skills or support is required to support that particular officer, and it also include the transformation team, because what we're very mindful of is when we're doing implementing new controls or processes, that we don't want to go anything that's going to impact on any transformation that we're doing. So that's something that we're just about to set up now going forward. Obviously, there's the performance of the team on Appendix 9, and then obviously Appendix 11 is the audit plan for 2026-27, which we're obviously just starting. I suppose the most important part as well is to give you an update on staffing within the team. Yeah. So when we last met, we had a vacancy of 2.6 FTE, which was a sizable chunk of my team. I'm pleased to say that we were able to recruit to 1.4 FTEs of those positions, and they actually start in 2 weeks, which is really good news. Following that, I did have a request from my current principal auditor to actually move over into one of the other vacancies. So I now have an advert out for a principal auditor, which is due to close on the 21st of June. And in terms of movement of the plan, there's only one area that's moved since we last met, which was, we were originally going to look at fleet, but actually we've changed that and we're looking at missed bin collections instead as part of our audit plan. So I'm happy to take any questions on that element of my progress report, and then I can go on to the rest if there are any.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Thanks for the report. Is there any particular reason why this missed bin collection item has been inserted into the work plan?
I think we're conscious that corporate complaints has increased as a result this year. There have been a number of issues in relation to missed bin collection, so it felt it was an opportunity and maybe a higher risk than the fleet review, so that was why we did it.
Okay. Thank you. Any comments or questions on the first part of the audit report before we come on to the Appendix B, I think it is. Is that one? No? Okay. Councillor Parkhurst.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. And I do note the implementation panel to be set up. I think that's a very good idea. I was going to mention about the no updates on DBS checks, page 229. No updates on the off-matrix agency spend either. So I imagine all these are going to be taken up by that panel, so I won't go into that. I want to just, before we go on to the EOTAS audit, I note on page 209, 210, that there's a red audit on Flint High School, and that we haven't been given a copy of that report. Now, we know from the publicly available information from Estyn that the Estyn report was probably the worst in Wales, and that there are serious governance and safeguarding concerns affecting the school, impacting upon the performance of the portfolio, and I find it very disturbing that as a governance and audit committee, we are not receiving sight of this report, because we receive sight of all red audit reports so that we can examine the serious issues found. So could I have, please, some explanation as to why that isn't the case? And then I might wish to come back, Chair. Thank you.
Lisa, are you able to comment on that?
Thank you, Chair, and I can explain the reasoning behind it. So obviously the schools are their own governing body and they have their own policies and procedures. So it's felt similar to when we didn't present reports on NEWID. I took the view to not present this particular one because it will be picked up through their own governing body and their own sort of governance framework. That was my basis for doing that, to be honest. The report was raised by the Chief Officer for Education, and I know that they are working very closely to support the school in relation to supporting them in implementation of any of those actions. If you would like me to share a copy of the report with you, I'm more than happy to do that, because obviously you're entitled to any copies of the audit report, so I'm happy to circulate that around if that would be of help.
I think the Chief Officer wants to come in at that point as well.
Yeah, just to assist with a response to that question. Councillor Parkhurst will know that I have committed to bring to the Education Overview and Scrutiny Committee an update report on Flint High School before the end of the academic year, and it is my intention to include reference to the matters identified within the finance audit that I requested at the school to be included in that update report in July.
Thank you. Are you happy with that response, Councillor Parkhurst?
Thank you, Chief Officer. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Alan. I'm partially happy in that I appreciate the offer to receive a copy of the report, and I would certainly like that. And I expect some other members of the committee may well like that as well. I do think, though, that this ought to be discussed in this forum. It might be that it has to be a part 2. I don't know what's in the report, but I think this committee, because of the seriousness of the Estin report, that does affect not only the school but this council, but I think that this committee should have a look from a governance aspect, the findings of that report. So I think that, whilst accepting the explanations, I think that this committee should perhaps consider whether it wants to receive the report here, and if so, that perhaps could be put into the forward work programme for the next meeting. Thank you.
I guess the question that crops up in my mind is really to what purpose, because it is a separate body, isn't it, from the council? Even if we express concerns about it and perhaps the pace at which corrective actions weren't taken, would that have any effect with the governing body? I don't know. I don't know what your feeling is about this, Chief Officer.
Well, obviously, I bow to Lisa's decision as our, audit manager, really, in terms of the decision not to bring it at this point to this committee. As I say, I've given the assurance that it will be informed, part of my report to scrutiny in July. Yes, but it is the responsibility of the governing body to oversee, obviously, the actions within that report. I can provide assurance to this committee that the portfolio team, as part of their ongoing work with Flint High School, obviously because they are in that follow-up category, will also be monitoring progress against the actions in that report. So, work is underway. I can assure you of that. The school have indicated the actions that they will be taking to address the recommendations in the report. But it is a matter for the governing body to oversee that and ensure that those actions are being undertaken in a timely fashion and that the remedial action is being taken.
Thank you. Do you still feel as though a report should be coming to this committee on this subject? Any other comments on that, on this issue? Can't see any hands raised.
If I can try and help to narrow down the field check, because of course the primary responsibility, as the Chief Officer has said, rests with the school. We, as a local education authority, have some residual responsibilities about, from memory, and I'm looking to Claire for confirmation here, about being satisfied that they are handling their processes appropriately, don't we? And perhaps, Chair, we focus and use this as an opportunity, because it might be a good opportunity to understand where the dividing lines fall between ourselves and responsibility at the school, to look at what our residual responsibilities are and say what we are doing to exercise those, and to be clear about what sits with us and what sits then with the school. Might help to raise awareness levels, as well as looking at whether we are doing everything that we should as the LEA.
Yep. So I think that would be determined by the local management of schools regulations, which clearly outlines the roles and responsibilities of school leaders and governing bodies. Our responsibilities sit under the statutory guidance for schools causing concern, which of course Flintshire sits under that category, which is why it is subject to all of our scrutiny and improvement processes within the education portfolio. So I will reiterate that, ensuring that that work is being undertaken at pace and that those actions are being updated. And of course, it will sit on the system, won't it, where the school will be having to provide evidence, because they will have the regular reminders of their audit report actions. They will need to upload that evidence onto the Pentana system. I see that evidence coming through, so I can see when schools are tardy, perhaps, in addressing their actions. I can assure this committee that I write to head teachers formally if those I'm glad you're nodding, Lisa. I do write to head teachers where actions are not being dealt with in a timely manner, to remind them that they have a responsibility to do that. And if over a period of time, despite all of those reminders, we felt that the school still is not responding appropriately, then we would escalate our use of our statutory powers, which again I have done on more than one occasion for schools in this authority. So I think it is quite clear where our responsibilities sit under our duty under legislation to ensure, obviously, appropriate standards of education and governance within our schools. But local management of schools legislation would set out what the responsibilities are of the school and governing body. But please be assured we do have that oversight and we do take remedial action.
Do you still want to propose that we have a report on Flint High School? Sorry, Councillor Ellis. I'll bring in Councillor Ellis first. Over to you, Councillor Ellis.
Sorry, I had trouble getting off mute then. I would support Councillor Parkhurst, and I would also ask a further question. So if that request is refused, a question, Chair, for Gareth through you, would the scrutiny committee, the education scrutiny committee, would be able to refer that report when it comes to them to this audit committee? Would it not?
Are you able to answer that, Gareth?
I am. There are the scrutiny and governance and audit committee perform two different functions within the organisation, as we know. Substantive issues are discussed at the scrutiny committees, and the audit committee is concerned to ensure that process is followed and that the processes are working correctly. Now, if the scrutiny committee wished to refer anything to governance and audit committee, it would need to be, well, is this the proper process, and is this process being followed? In effect, do we have adequate systems? Which is why when I was talking and making my comments earlier, I was talking about highlighting where that residual role lies and what responsibilities we have to make sure. But I mean, it sounds as though that's going to be the focus for the Chief Officer's report to the scrutiny committee in any event. Perhaps it might be as well to see what transpires with that report, and to see whether having that, once that report has been considered, any questions do still remain. Don't know, Chair.
Can we propose that a report does come before this committee relating to Flint High School, but obviously the shape and the content of that report will depend upon the report that's gone to the scrutiny committee first? Would that be a way forward? Would you be happy with that, Councillor Parkhurst? Once it's known what the content and the shape of the report is that's gone to the overview and scrutiny committee, the report come to us after that?
Chair, I can't remember the respective dates of the education and our next meeting, but if the education one is before our next meeting, then that would seem appropriate to consider the report at our next meeting. I do think, because of the serious nature of the Estin report, and Lisa's team has recorded this as a red audit, and Lisa's very professional in the way she conducts things, and her team is, and I just think that for openness and transparency, and that for the assurance that all the governance aspects, including the residual matters which the Chief Officer for Governance has highlighted, I do think that we should, as a committee, see the whole report, and then we can see what actions are being taken, and we can form our own judgments. So yes, I do think that's important, Chair.
In that case, I think the feeling in the room, and probably amongst those members who are dialing into this meeting, is that we do have a report to a future committee. Can we leave that to officers to decide when that's going to come? Are you happy with that, Councillor Parkhurst? As long as it doesn't take an inordinate amount of time. Yeah, okay, thank you. Can we then move on to the second part of this item? It's Appendix A3, not Appendix B, as I said before. So you're going to introduce this first of all, Lisa.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this is the review that was requested by the Chief Officer for Education. It's on education other than schools, which we refer to as EOTIS. Yeah. So just to give some context, the requirement for the Council to provide EOTIS has been in place since 1996. Section 19 of the Education Act 1996, as amended in Section 47, provides that each local authority should make arrangements for the provision of suitable education at schools or otherwise than at schools for those children of compulsory school age who, by reason of illness, exclusion from schools or otherwise, may not or for any period receive suitable education unless arrangements are made. So the Council currently provides EOTIS for learners who are out of school due to medical reasons, which extend for longer than a 4-week period, who require specialised individual placements, or if they're at high risk of exclusion or require support for reintegration to mainstream or alternative provision, or of being permanently excluded from the school. I think what it should be noted is that following COVID, the pandemic, which caused a significant disruption to the education and still has a lasting impact on the number of learners who have struggled to re-engage with the school environment. As a consequence, the requirement for EOTIS is actually outpacing now the available provision at local authority and also at a national level, which is resulting in the level of demand that where systems weren't originally designed for when they were put in place. At the last pupil level annual report, in January 2025, there was currently around 219 children receiving EOTIS at that particular point. So the areas that we looked at as part of the review was to make sure that the EOTIS is clear and consistent around how the Council chooses to deliver that service provision, determining how those processes and demands are assessed and decided upon, reviewing the processes around EOTIS panel, examining whether to ensure all other interventions have been attempted by mainstream school prior to the referral of EOTIS, examining how specific provision and obligations are met to the current capacity and resource issues, reviewing the financial information including performance against budget and funding sources, and reviewing the risks we detailed within the Council's risk register. So the areas that we looked at are the ones that I've just mentioned about. So what we found, and I'll go high level in terms of what we found, and then I'll hand it over to the Chief Officer and Service Manager to come in to give an update. Just to bear in mind that this is quite a recent report that's been issued. So in terms of time from issue to actually implementing actions, it's been quite short. But you've also mentioned earlier on about bringing back a mid-year, 6-month report, so we could probably incorporate that. So the areas where we looked at and what we found was information in relation to the provision of EOTIS could not easily be identified. Children receiving EOTIS provision may become lost within the education systems due to the current systems that we have in place not being fully recorded. Safeguarding arrangements may not be in place for some providers. Commissioning process doesn't exist for EOTIS, and all the contracts are out of date. Costs obviously exceed provision. It obviously has an impact on the out-of-county spend. provision, the monitoring of the provision, the policy reviews and awareness of responsibilities within that provision, and the opportunity, lastly, to explore other best practices that are occurring with schools and other areas. So if you're happy, I will hand over to the Chair, to the Chief Officer for Education.
Yes, please. Thank you. Claire, over to you.
Yeah, Dales present our power, Claire Homard's Chief Officer for Education and Youth, and I'm supported today by Jeanette Rock, our Senior Manager for Inclusion, with whom IOTA sits within Jeanette's remit. So thank you, Lisa, for that introduction. And again, I would like to reiterate that the portfolio deliberately requested this report because we were aware some of the challenges that we were facing as a result of the exponential growth of children requiring this form of support. You know, and a growing concern within the portfolio that our systems and our processes were not enabling us to manage that as effectively as we would like. So we really saw this as a deliberate strategy, really, to use this audit as an improvement tool for us to enable to have a really clear understanding of what was working well, what wasn't working well, and then obviously for us to identify some key actions then to take forward, you know, to make those secure improvements. I think the challenge as well has been the level of resource within the education portfolio in terms of managing this very complex area. As I'm sure you've realised from the report, this is a very complex area. You know, like all portfolios in the council, we have made significant reductions when we've been required to support the setting of the council's legal budget with efficiencies. So I think we need to recognise that in terms of the capacity with the team, that was also, you know, a particular factor. We have been already working on some of these actions at pace, and I think, Jeanette, you're going to sort of talk the committee through that. So we would be more than happy to bring a report back, you know, in about 6 months' time, where I would be confident that we would be able to demonstrate that a number of key actions have been undertaken and embedded within the portfolio's approach. So just noting some of the comments earlier in the meeting when Jeanette and I first arrived in the room, you know, I would like to acknowledge the independence of our audit team and the constructive challenge that they provide to us as senior managers within the portfolio. I think, you know, this report is a good case in question for this one, and we've been very welcoming their expertise in terms of helping us think about how we strengthen our controls around this particular area of our provision. So by way of an introduction, that's from me. Jeanette, would you like to perhaps pick up some of the highlights from the report that you'd like to bring to the committee, and then we're more than happy to take questions from colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. I think, you know, you mentioned there, Claire, that we've tried to work at pace, and I think that is in recognition of the severity of some of the items that have been raised within the report. Just starting from the beginning, really, in terms of data systems. It's quite challenging, actually, working within the portfolio, given the number of different data systems that we use. So we have a synergy system for our education use. Schools are on a different system, and actually trying to marry the data across the two can be quite challenging. What we have done, though, since receiving the report, is we've brought in some additional capacity to look carefully at how that information can be held in one master report, which is certainly the point that was raised by the auditor. I think it was fair to say that the auditor that worked with us, she felt that we knew where the children were. We just had a number of different systems that held that information, and it was important to actually collate those as one. And so we've looked at the synergy system, and we now have a master list of all EOTAS learners that we have also wrapped around the system to ensure that that data is maintained. Having the information there in the first place is only as good as maintenance of it. So we're working with the different parts of our service who will have responsibility to ensure that that data is updated as appropriate. It's a comprehensive system on Synergy that actually identifies each pupil and the allocation of EOTAS that they are receiving. And so the agreement with, as I say, all the relevant officers is that will be updated on a regular basis to ensure that the information there is current. So we've determined, as I say, that will be on the Synergy system, and that is moving forward. We're looking at how that system can hold all of the relevant records, because one of the items that was picked up again by the auditor was that we hold referrals from our EOTAS panel in one section on our IT system and not on a pupil record. And so our SMIT manager has been working with the Synergy providers to see how that then will be overcome. And we think that that is possible. So we will move to have all of the information on the master record within the Synergy system going forward. So that obviously is an important move. With regards to safeguarding, I wouldn't want the committee to think that we didn't have safeguarding processes in place when we were commissioning EOTIS provision for our learners. But what the audit found was that whilst we had a provider checklist and we undertook a verification visit with providers, some of the documentation that was referenced wasn't stored on our system. So where we'd asked for copies of safeguarding policies, when the auditor looked, they weren't always attached to the documentation. What we have done in response to that, in recognition of obviously the serious nature of that, is that we have gone back to all of our providers and we are requesting that information. We have strengthened our commissioning process around it. We've strengthened the provider checklist, and that's gone out to every provider that we currently use, and we're just bringing that information back in now. We've brought in a specific officer to work on that for us, and she's collating the database for us. What we are going to, well, alongside that, we are developing, as you would imagine, the overall commissioning process that we're looking to put in place going forward. And so where the providers have provided, we've received the information back, that will then go through one of our panels to ensure that we're still comfortable and feel that the provider is appropriate for us to continue using going forward, with the view of creating a preferred provider checklist that will work for us as a portfolio, but also we will make available to schools as well. That's, as I say, that's happening at the moment. We're pulling that information back in. Alongside this, Claire made reference to capacity within our service, and that has been a challenge. And so to support all of this work going forward, we've identified that we need a dedicated EOTIS officer. We're working on the job description for that post now and looking to recruit hopefully for September as outlined within the audit. The other work alongside that, one of the points that the auditor referenced was about our ability to scrutinise our spend on EOTIS appropriately. As Lisa referenced at the start of this, EOTIS is quite a complex matter, and we have different areas of spend and provision that are considered different elements of EOTIS. And we have been working with our colleagues in finance following the out-of-county review as well to look at how that information is recorded within the finance master sheet as well to be able to determine different provisions. So on our EOTIS master sheet that has been created within Energy, we are coding different provisions under different headings, and we're going to use those headings within the finance master sheet as well, so that there's a correlation between those two matters, and we'll be able to, as managers, to pick out different elements of provision and then look at the financial cost of those to cross-reference the two there. Just looking through my list. In terms of the policy, we have a policy as a council in terms of EOTIS. Back in 2020, I refreshed that policy, and that was pointed out by Audit hadn't been through committee. So we're just finalising that to then go forward through committee. So that's sort of an overview of the actions that have been taken so far. If I stop there, Chair, and open for questions.
Thank you for those comments and for giving us some of the background and the progress that's made following the internal audit work. A couple of comments stroke questions from me. First one really relates to the control issue concerning information relating to the provision of EOTIS. I guess when I was reading it, it felt like a continuation of a theme that seems to have emerged from quite a few audit reports we've had over the last 1 or 2 years. That there isn't one version of the truth. That there's information on spreadsheets and then there's information somewhere else on a system. Can staff are having to spend time, in some cases having to reconcile the two. And I suppose we just need to be assured that there isn't another problem lurking somewhere else within the council, because, as I say, this seems to be a bit of a theme that it exists in other parts of the council as well, this having to keep, you know, separate records. And then turning that into a question about timescales, you've, on page 219, excuse me, the deadline for addressing that particular control issue is shown as the 31st of June 2026. Given the scale of the problem, and it, as I say, data being on spreadsheets and also on systems of one form and another, I think it also says somewhere that collation is a lengthy and consuming process. I just wonder whether the deadline is realistic for that, or whether in fact it seems, at least from the narrative, that it's a much bigger problem and could take a long time to resolve. And then also, on to move on to page 222, talking about safeguarding arrangements. The agreed action says that there will be regular monitoring of the safeguarding arrangements. Regular monitoring will be carried out, and evidence. Again, a deadline of July 2026. Again, given the potential scale of the problem identified in the internal audit report, is that deadline realistic? It feels as though it will take quite some time to get to grips with, unless you've got resources to tackle this that we don't really know about. I mean, you've alluded to the fact that, you know, resources, the availability of resources is a problem, is an issue. Okay, I'll leave it with those two to start off with.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the timescale around having one master system and one sort of database of EOTUS children, we've got that in place now. So we've been able to collate all of that information. We used information from the EOTUS census that we have to return on an annual basis as a starter for that. And we've got a dedicated person who has now pulled all the information regarding every child in Flintshire who is accessing EOTUS provision onto the Synergy database. And we have that list currently there. So in terms of that action, I'm confident that has happened. And as I say, the important thing for me then was how we ensure that data is maintained. And so we've been working with all of the parts of the service that would update that information through the various panels and through the various provision to ensure that everybody understands that their responsibility is to update that on a regular basis and to maintain that. So I think that's the challenge that we would have, but the addition of the post in September that we're anticipating, that would be part of their role as well, to double check that that information has been reviewed and is updated on a regular basis through checking through various panels that we have to ensure that that has been captured on the main system. So in terms of that timescale, I'm confident that is one that we will definitely meet. In terms of the safeguarding one, I think there's obviously some urgency about that, isn't there, in terms of providing assurance to the committee that we are taking that seriously and we are doing all that we can to ensure the safety of our learners. And again, we have brought in some dedicated capacity that is working on that. And so that person, as I say, is contacting all of our providers, pulling the information back in. We've had a significant amount of that already, and we're chasing up on that. And so we're anticipating that in terms of that, having the key documentation around all of the providers that we use, we should have that by the end of
so that baseline will be reset by the end of the academic year, and then obviously going forward it's then the sort of annual checks around that to ensure that they are current and we are still satisfied with the safeguarding arrangements of those providers. But again, we felt it was really important that that issue was sort of remedied by the end of this academic year, ready obviously for a start in September.
No, I was just going to say, I admitted to say that at the start. We recognised that what we didn't have necessarily in place was that annual monitoring, and so that will be a key part of the EOSTA's post holders' role to make sure that that data then is updated on that regular basis. So thank you.
Thank you for that. Questions, comments, Councillor Parkhurst, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, officers, for presenting that report. And I think first of all, credit should be given for the portfolio to have initiated the report, to have recognised there were potential shortcomings and to have taken that initiative. So thank you, and I'm sure we all welcome that action and this report. This report does indicate some serious failings. Otherwise it wouldn't be a red audit. I quote page 222 at the top: the risk of a child falling out of the system, not being accounted for, remains high. Chair, you talked earlier, or you asked earlier, about were there any trends, and you identified the lack of a single version of truth as being a trend. This is also a trend. We saw exactly the same thing, albeit in different circumstances, with Flint High, where there was no accurate record of where children were at any one time. And here we've got the same potential issue. And as I said earlier, we are corporate parents. We have a direct responsibility for the safety of children, and that is of major concern. I'm also particularly concerned about the reference going down on page 222 near the bottom, where it says that it was found that new providers are not revisited annually to ensure the processes and controls of safeguarding arrangements remain in place and are up to date, particularly where we have external providers, where we don't have that element of direct control. This is something which is, really quite shocking, and I hope the actions will address that speedily. I want to look at the financial aspects, because we know that the portfolio and the council as a whole is under severe budget pressures. On page 223, we have a situation where a contract was signed in October 22 at £40 per hour, but we've been paying £45 per hour. And since that time, we spent 2.1 million with that contractor. So if my sums are correct, if we paid the correct amount, we would have paid £233,000 less than we've actually paid. Now, if my figures are wrong, someone please correct me, but that's a very simple, sum to calculate. So Lisa's report says on the right-hand side, if I can just find the right words, on page 224, let me just find it. Yes, here we go. Under URN 3801, it says management will have full control, including upfront costings, etc. So really that suggests that the management doesn't or hasn't had full control. And I think that's evidence in the fact that we seemingly have been overpaying to the extent of £233,000 since October 22 on just one supplier. And perhaps there are other suppliers where we have similarly overpaid. I don't know. So final question, Chair, is who is responsible for children who are in the EOTAS system? Is it the schools who have referred them? Is it the council? Is it the external third-party providers who we've got little control over? I'd really like to know who has the primary responsibility, because I think there's a danger that schools who are having issues with perhaps a difficult child may breathe a sigh of relief when that child is taken off their hands, and that child is then disappearing into a sort of nebulous system where no one is really taking care of them. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know who's going to answer those questions. You leave it to you.
Thank you, Jeanette.
That's it. Thank you, Councillor Parkhurst. In terms of the list and not necessarily knowing where children were, I hope the auditor won't mind me saying, but she certainly, when, in her conversations with me, she recognised that she felt that officers did know where children were, and she was pretty confident with the systems that people were using would capture all of those learners. The challenge to us as a management team was that that information wasn't all in one place then for us to cross-reference that, and we recognise the importance of that. As I said, we've put that system in place as quickly as we could to ensure that we've got that ability to cross-reference them. In terms of the annual visits, again, we've got different types of provision under EOTUS. The provider that you've referenced in terms of the contract there, we actually have weekly visits with that provider to check that the provision we are commissioning from them has taken place, and the attendance of those children is reported back to us. We have an officer that has that regular contact. In other cases, where it's a more specialist school type provision, there would be an annual review with the learning advisor responsible for that child to ensure that the provision is meeting their needs. What we have taken from the auditor is that what we haven't got is that overarching view of ensuring that policies are in place. And as I say, that is something that we are going to look to address. So we're on site at the provisions in many cases, actually seeing what's happening, but we recognise the need to do that background due diligence in terms of ensuring that processes are there. In terms of that contract, I think what it's fair to say is that the contract wasn't updated in terms of the costs. So as the costs of the provision were increased to us, then we didn't go back and amend that document to reflect that. So I don't believe there has been an overpayment. I think there was an error on our part in terms of that monitoring and ensuring that the document was accurate. Another factor that was raised was that in the EOTUS panel in particular, the costs of provision are not provided up front, and that is really because we only access 2 provision through that EOTUS panel, and the costs of those sessions are known by the manager. But again, we accepted that actually wasn't reported as part of the process. So if the agreement was around 5 hours, then we would know that cost is £45 for this, but agreed that it should be put onto the minutes so that was clarity. In terms of our other panel that agrees EOTUS provision, that's the Joint Commissioning Out of County panel. Then as part of that options appraisal, because there are a number of options that may be considered by that panel in terms of appropriate provision for a learner, then the costs of those are recorded, and we have a finance officer that sits in that meeting to record the cost of each provision. Under out of county, when a provision is commissioned, we have an individual provision agreement that is written for each learner, and that captures the costs of that provision going forward as well. So there's a point of reference of what was agreed, being mindful obviously of inflationary costs that happens in terms of provision, but there's that document from the point of agreement around the provision. I think that was the point.
Do you want to come back, Councillor Parkhurst?
Yeah. Sorry, Jeanette, do you want to?
I think I missed your final point there about who's got responsibility. Ultimately, for our provision, we have responsibility. So the local authority is responsible for the EOTUS that we commission.
Have you got some further points?
Yeah, Chair, can I just come back on the cost of this particular contract? I can only go by the audit report, which says that the contract was for £40 an hour, and we've been paying £45 an hour. So I'm just taking it as sort of black and white. We have overpaid. If the intention was to increase it to £45 an hour, but the contract wasn't updated, well, that's tough on the contractor, isn't it? You know, we should be paying what we are contractually obliged to pay. And if we have overpaid by £233,000, are we going to try to recoup that money?
Lisa.
Just to clarify, so the report says that the contract, the rate was within the contract. What we were saying that the contract, because it had been created in 2020 or 2022, it was out of date because there is an uplift usually on an annual basis, and the contract was not reflecting what the current rate is. So that's where the finding was. We weren't suggesting that there was an overpayment.
Okay, thank you for that. Any further questions or comments? Councillor Ellis?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
Okay, right. It's just the mute button was really behaving strangely. I echo what Councillor Parker said about thanking the Chief Officer for actually requesting this report, because there are some, like has been mentioned, some very serious issues within the report, especially the safeguarding, and I'm assured by what the Chief Officer has actually said and what we've been told, that measures will be in place to improve that. I'd also noticed, along with Councillor Parkhurst, about the difference in the £40 and the £45 an hour, and it does actually read, I'm sorry to say, that we should have been paying 40 and we were paying 45. That's how I've read it as well. What actually concerned me was on page 225, where it states it is unclear how the provision costs are detailed prior to committing to the provision, and how management are balancing costs when costs are unknown and not detailed individually in advance. That's quite alarming, I think. And I know it's been touched on about that, but the risk as well, if the number of pupils, and that's on page 225, accessing this type of provision continues to rise and the local specialist provision in Flintshire remains full, the number of pupils attending out-of-county placements will continue to escalate, placing increasing financial pressure on the service and the out-of-county expenditure, which we know is already out of control, really, through circumstances sometimes beyond our control. But I do think this report will actually help, like I've mentioned before. Also, on page 226, where it says there is a risk of contract services are procured and not in accordance with the contract procurement rules. And it goes further on to mention on 227 that staff are unaware of their responsibilities. And also on 227, the policy hasn't been approved by members. That's been touched on. But I do think, like I mentioned before, I would like to see a progress report on this in the next 6 months, because some of the dates will have come and gone then, won't they? Especially the safeguarding and quite a few. So I would like to see an update, if that is possible, please, in the next 6 months. And thank you again, Claire.
Thank you, Councillor. Claire, are you able to respond to those questions?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Ellis, for your comments, which are all really, really helpful. Jeanette, I think you possibly want to respond to some of the operational matters around that, and then perhaps I could talk more broadly about our sort of developing strategy in terms of expanding our provision locally, with a view that that will have a positive impact on reducing out-of-county spend in years to come. So, Jeanette, can I come to you first? Thank you.
Thank you. So in terms of the section where it said about the costs being unknown, that was in reference to our EOTAS panel. And as in my answer previously, I acknowledged that that wasn't recorded as part of the panel process. It is going forward. We will have those costs there. But that panel makes decision on 2 providers, really, in terms of medical home tuition. And so the costs of that are known by the panel, but recognise that that wasn't captured as part of the process. I'll leave the specialist provision to Claire, but in terms of contract training, I think, you know, this is something that we've definitely taken on board. I attended the contract monitoring training that I think was almost a month ago. So we're recognising as a service how that we need to deepen our understanding with regards to the financial processes to make sure that we are compliant with the requirements. Coming back to the post that I've referenced, then that will be a key part of that person's role going forward in terms of the contract development and monitoring, so that we've got a dedicated post within our service. At the moment, we haven't, and that's sat with a number of people, and I think that's been part of the challenge that we've experienced. So having one dedicated person who has responsibility for that and can support managers around the completion of that and the monitoring will certainly be helpful. But again, just to say that, you know, we requested the document and it's been really helpful in guiding our work going forward as well to secure the change required.
Yeah, thank you. And obviously, Councillor Ellis, that individual that we are looking to appoint who will take that sort of operational responsibility, of course, will be appropriately trained through the training offer through our procurement team. And as a senior management team, actually, we do regularly engage with our business partner from the procurement service who attends our directorate management team meetings on a quarterly basis to keep us updated in terms of changes to procurement regulations. Obviously, there's been quite a change recently, hasn't there, in terms of legislation that we're now all implementing. So senior managers do understand their responsibilities and their need to keep their training updated to enable them to fulfil that aspect of their role. We are all aware of the challenges around the management. I wouldn't say it's out of control because there are robust processes around the management of the out-of-county budget, but this is a reflection of the level of demand that we are facing, and this is not a unique Flintshire issue. This is a nationwide issue where we have a significant number of learners for whom we cannot at the current time make appropriate local provision, and therefore, in order to make sure that their needs are met, are having to source provision elsewhere, known as out of county. Colleagues will know that obviously we've got legislation in Wales now that centres around the not-for-profit agenda for providers of care, for children, and that's a very laudable policy, but it does bring additional sort of unforeseen consequences in that, there is a reduction of number of providers in the marketplace. Here within Wales, which then makes those places, less available, and it also puts the ball very much in the court of the provider in terms of the charges that they can then levy, and we're all chasing those places, aren't we, to meet the needs of our learners. So in recognition of that and the challenges that we are facing across the board in terms of our specialist provision in Flintshire, there is a report progressing through the cabinet cycle as we speak that provides an overview of a piece of work that we have undertaken over the last 12 months to undertake a root and branch review of all of the specialist provision that we have here in the authority, in terms of what our expectations are around our mainstream schools in meeting learners' needs, where we have specialist resource bases, our two specialist schools in Pencoch and Maes Hyfryd, obviously our school Plasdadwyn, our Prw, and obviously the fact that that report is very clearly telling us that we need to radically restructure our provision, which of course is going to come with costs in terms of both capital and revenue pressures. But in order for us to meet the needs of those learners, obviously we need to take some action. So that report is on its way through the cabinet cycle. It sets out very clearly how we believe by making some strategic investments and expanding our provision locally, and recognising this will take a little bit of time, that the whole plan is that is reinvesting potential money then that would long term be a pressure on the out of county budget. Obviously we've got learners who are in the system now who are within specialist providers who are meeting their needs, and it's likely that they are going to stay with those providers until they finish their statutory education journey. However, the point of the strategy is to increase our capacity locally so that actually going forward we can divert learners away from that out-of-county provision, not only from a cost perspective, as Councillor Ellis and Councillor Parkhurst have referenced, but actually also about meeting the needs of our children locally, because, you know, our vision within the portfolio is that, you know, the vast majority of Flintshire children should be educated within Flintshire, within their local community. So that would enable us to address that as well. So, you know, that's something that obviously will be coming through Cabinet, through our Education Scrutiny Committee as well, for comments, you know, from members. But I just wanted to assure the committee that we have refreshed that long-term strategy with a view to ensuring that we have the right provision for the learners locally. I hope that helps.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you. I think the committee would like to receive a progress report on the implementation of the agreed actions set out in the appendix to these reports on this item.
I think 6 months would be a good
time.
time, and bearing in mind, I think the last action is due for completion by December, isn't it? So I think that would be really timely. But hopefully you are reassured already from the comments from today that we are working on this at pace. And, you know, the addition of that capacity within the team will be absolutely fundamental in terms of enabling us to progress these actions.
Thank you both.
Yeah,
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? No. Councillor Ellis?
Sorry, it's not a comment or a question, it's just an apology. I'm going to have to leave the meeting now because I'm due at another meeting and I've got to travel to Eulo to attend that. So my apologies, Chair.
No, that's okay. I think we're virtually finished, aren't we? So if there's no further comments or questions, I'll go to the recommendations, which are on page 209. So the recommendation is to consider accept the report. And I think the second part of the recommendation would be to request a report on the implementation of the agreed actions regarding EOTIS in 6 months' time. Okay. Can I have a proposer for those, please? Thank you, Councillor Ellis. Seconder? Councillor Carberry, thank you. All those in favour? Thank you. Any against? No. Any abstentions? No. I think that was the last item of the day. Thank you very much again for presenting the report and for answering all our questions. Thank you again for attending today. It's been a very long meeting, I know. So